I'm not an expert on forensic medicine or any of this legal medicine. I'm a social activist. I also happen to be the president of the World Council of Arya Samaj, and I have been in the struggle for the liberation of bonded labor, child labor, for last more than 30 years. Now, it was very recently that I have come across a case of inhuman torture and cold-blooded murder, where I was appointed as an interlocutor by no less an authority than the Union Minister, Home Minister of India, the Central Union Home Minister, Mr. P. Chidambaram. The background of this whole appointment and my work was, for last many years, 4 to 5 years, our Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh has been saying time and again that the Maoists, who are also called Naxalites, they pose the gravest, the biggest threat to the internal security of India. They have been killing people, and not just ordinary people, they have been also killing the security forces, paramilitary forces. On 6th of April this year, in the forest of Dantewada, the security personnel were out to sort of on a search mission inside the forest. 76 of them were ambushed by the Maoists and they were killed brutally. This was considered to be the biggest ever onslaught on Indian establishment by the Maoists ever since 1967. 1967 was the year when I used to teach in St. Xavier's College, Calcutta. I used to teach in Calcutta University. I used to practice in the High Court of Calcutta. And that was the time when this Naxalite movement, Naxalbari movement started from West Bengal. It was crushed, it was brutally crushed by the then Chief Minister, and hundreds of young men and women were tortured brutally in prison cells, and they were killed in cold-blooded so-called encounters. Siddharth Shankar Ray was then the architect of crushing this uprising of the landless people, those who were demanding their land rights, and the youth who were in the forefront of this whole struggle, who had taken up guns and who believed on the lines of Mao Zedong of China that the revolution will grow from the barrel of a gun. So these Naxalites or the Maoists were considered to be out to overthrow the state, those who did not believe in the Indian Constitution and did not believe in Indian democracy nor in the electoral process. So the state thought that they were within their rights, constitutional mandate, to finish them off by any means, fair or foul. That was the beginning in 1967-68. In the beginning, I was myself tempted to join the Maoists, the Naxalites, because they are fighting for justice for the poorest of the poor in this country. But knowing fully well that I can never wield a gun myself, not kill a chicken even to eat, never been vegetarian all my life, I decided not to go with the Maoists or the Naxalites. I decided to be a social human rights activist I left my job, my family and everybody in 1968, March 25th, and came to this part of India called Haryana and organized the poorest of the poor, the landless and the peasants and the farmers and everybody, the stone quarry workers, the brick kiln workers, got released 176,000 bonded labor who are considered to be the contemporary forms of slavery. I was chair in the United Nations under the Human Rights Commission from 1994 to 2004. Now that's an old story. What I want to share this morning with you is, when this incident took place this year on 6th of April, when 76 of our paramilitary forces were gunned down brutally by the Maoists in the forest of Dantewada. Nobody dared go there, visit that place, find out the truth, why and where it all happened, or go to the root causes of this whole uprising. People from a distance issued some statements condemning the Maoists, their violence, and some who sympathized with the Maoists, they condemned the Operation Green Hunt. That means the official machinery or the paramilitary forces who were out to finish off the Maoists. So this type of mutual allegations, they were going on through the press. But we, some 50, 60 of us who believed in Gandhi's non-violence, who believed in human rights and social justice, we came out a month later. On the 5th of May, we all assembled in the city of Raipur and we went on a march against Maoist violence and also against the state violence which was being foisted in the name of Operation Green Hunt. We said both of these violence must stop and both the parties should come on the table for talks, and there should be negotiated peace for talks so that the country can know what's the reason why the Maoists or the indigenous people have taken to arms and why is the government hell-bent to kill them and to finish them off. No sooner we returned from the march on 10th of May, 11th of May, early morning, sitting in my office, I received a letter from the Union Home Minister thanking me, congratulating me, saying that you have done a wonderful job going to that area and saying that there should be no violence from either side. So, dear Swamiji, can you help us, the Government of India, to negotiate peace and talks with the Maoists? These are the steps I want to suggest. So in his letter signed by the Union Home Minister himself, on his letterhead, he elaborated 5 points, 5 steps to go about, that the Maoists should first abjure violence for 72 hours. And during that period there will be no attack from the government side also. And in the meantime they will formulate some sort of a ceasefire which will be more permanent or more long term. And in this way the talks can go on. The letter was very well taken and I tried to negotiate peace with the Maoists. With whatever little context I had, I got the letter sent across to them in the forest areas where they were operating underground. I sent the letter on 20th of May and the Maoist leadership, who were very, very inaccessible, underground, unidentifiable, their leadership got round, they deliberated on that letter by the Union Home Minister, and pat came the reply signed on 31st of May, means that's just 10 days later. It was signed by the spokesperson for the Maoist Mr. Azad. And in that letter they said, we are ready for talks. We are ready for peace and negotiations. And there are many other things. But they said, let there be ceasefire, mutual and simultaneous. I thought it was quite a breakthrough and a very positive response to the offer made by our government. But when I gave the letter to the Union Home Minister, Mr. P. Chidambaram, in his office here, he said, no, it is not enough. They have to give us the date from when they will abjure violence for minimum of 72 hours. So I tried to understand his position. After meeting him 6-7 times, I wrote another letter dated 26th of May. 26th of June. I wrote another letter to Mr. Azad saying that please appreciate the demand of the Home Minister and please give us some date. And if you have any problem giving a date, I am giving 3 dates out of which you can choose one. He was carrying my letter dated 26th of June, which he received on 30th of June, 4-5 days later. And he wanted to consult some of his senior leaders. For the final round of consultation, he went to Nagpur railway station as per the statements given by the Maoists themselves. When he came out of the train, he was walking on the street in the marketplace of Nagpur, central India. He was picked up by the police and the police tortured him, knowing full well that he was carrying my letter, knowing full well that he was responding to the peace overtures by the Union Home Minister, where I was acting as a negotiator, knowing fully well that he was number 3 in the rank of the Maoist leadership, that he was their spokesperson, everything. They nabbed him, they picked him up, and they tortured him in a manner that he became completely helpless. And they took him to the forest of Adilabad the same day night. That means 1st July morning they caught him, and 1st July night around 12 in the midnight or 1 in the morning of 2nd July, he was shot dead. The police said there was an encounter. The police FIR said that we got information about 25 to 30 Maoist leaders fully armed, and they were seen in the forest of Adilabad in Andhra Pradesh. And when we challenged them, they fired upon us. We returned the fire. There was mutual firing from both sides and there was encounter. Next day morning, when the daylight broke, we saw 2 dead bodies. One was that of Azad and another person we could not identify. That another dead body happened to be that of a journalist. A journalist from Delhi had gone to Nagpur to interview Azad and come back by the next day train. That was what he told his wife, Babita Pandey. Journalist name was Hemchand Pandey. But he did not return. His mobile phone was switched off. When I got this news, I was by then in Melbourne and in Brisbane. I had gone there to find out about the conditions of the Aborigines there in Australia, who are equally being exploited like our own indigenous people here in India. When I got the news through the internet, I came back, immediately went to the Union Home Minister and asked him for his version. His whole attitude was very, very callous. Like he was not able to have eye contact, like his body language changed. like he was trying to hide something from me, like he was, trying to pose as if he did not know anything, or whatever the police has done was right. So I was so deeply disappointed by his whole attitude and his response that I started feeling myself guilty, that on his behest that I wrote that letter, on his behest that I agreed to be the negotiator. And then when he was responding, the Maoist leader was responding, instead of helping him to come forward for peace, he was nabbed, he was caught, he was picked up and he was killed. And a false report was lodged by the police that they killed him when he was on a hilltop about 500 feet, and the police fired from below, and it was night time. So the distance of 500 feet, the time is night and darkness, and the bullet hit them and they fell dead. This is what the FIR, that means the police report, says. The very next day, 3rd of July, the body went for postmortem. The postmortem report was hidden from the public or from those who demanded the postmortem report, including the deceased relatives or his friends and comrades. But subsequently, through Right to Information Act, postmortem report was obtained. And a very well-known magazine in this country called Outlook magazine, the editor got a copy of that postmortem report. He gave that postmortem report to 3 very, very eminent forensic experts of this country. All India Institute of Medical Sciences here in Delhi and some other places. I have got all their names. Dr. Sudhir Gupta of AIIMS, Dr. Uma Dethan, former head of Department Forensic Medicine and Police Surgeon, Thiruvananthapuram. He is author of a book called Principles and Practices of Forensic. And this earlier Professor Sudhir Gupta is Associate Professor of Forensic Medicine and Toxicology, etc., etc. And a third also a retired director, Central Forensic Science Laboratory, Chandigarh. 3 of them were not told whose postmortem report it was. Without giving or revealing the identity, without revealing the identity of the person whose postmortem report it was, they were simply asked their opinion. And each one of them said from the bullet injuries that it cannot be from a distance of 500 feet. As a matter of fact, I'll read out a little portion. The forensic medicine, which also deals with decoding fatal bullet wounds, the words darkening, blackening and burning are revealing. Experts with hundreds of autopsies behind them all say that when there is burning associated with a darkening or blackening of an entry wound, it can only mean that the victim has been shot from a distance less than 7.5 centimeter or less, practically point blank. Each one of the forensic experts has said that he has been killed point blank. And it cannot be from a distance of 500 feet. Another observation which they have all agreed is that the bullet has entered the body from below upwards and not from above and coming out from the lower rib from the back. No. So the police report has completely been falsified by the forensic experts. Now on the basis of this report, I went to see the Prime Minister of our country and I said the police version, that means the government version, has now been, the lie has been nailed. Will you please order a judicial inquiry into the whole thing so that the truth will come out, so that the world can know why this peace process is not making any headway? The Prime Minister listened to me for 20 minutes. He gave a very sympathetic hearing, very compassionate hearing. I was very much impressed, at the end of which he said, yes, we have to get the inquiry done. When he said that, I asked him whether I can give it to the press so the world knows that the Prime Minister is ready for the inquiry, which the Home Minister has refused earlier. He said, no, just wait for 4 or 5 days. Let me organize the whole thing and then I'll get back to you after 5 days. That was on 20th of July. I trusted him very much. He has been my good friend and he is considered to be very honest and a man of integrity. But very unfortunately, it's more than 3.5 months now he has not instituted a judicial inquiry. Another person who got killed, whom the police could not identify, he too was tortured by the police at the outside of the Nagpur railway station. His name being Hemchand Pandey, a journalist from Delhi who had gone to interview the Maoist leader. And why was he killed? Because he was the evidence. He was the evidence that the Maoist leader was being picked up and being done to death. So if he had also not been done to death, he would have come out with the truth. So it was necessary for the police to finish him off. His post-mortem report has also been obtained and we are going to get forensic experts' reports about that post-mortem report also very soon, which will more or less corroborate the same type of evidence. Friends, what I am trying to drive at is, as Suzanne rightly said, India became signatory to the Convention Against Torture, the UN Convention on Torture in 1997, but has not yet ratified. 2010 and ratification is not there. I want to ask my learned friends sitting here on the dais and there in the audience, what could be the reason? Why is the government of India, Dr. K.S. Subramaniam, one of the topmost police officers of this country, who headed border security forces and who is known for his integrity, he would bear me out. There must be some nasty design behind it. Why are they hiding? Why are they not ratifying this convention? This is high time that this conference, whatever be your other objectives of holding a conference like that in India, inviting so many eminent foreign delegates, one objective or my request would be that let us pass a resolution, demand from the government of India to ratify this convention which they have signed in 1997. They should lose no more time. Otherwise, their intention should be, what? Will think that there are some ulterior motives behind not signing, not ratifying this torture convention which they have signed some 15 years ago. So this is high time that this conference must come out with some positive outcome. We should all be signing a petition or a memorandum or something demanding from the Prime Minister of India that without losing any more time, please ratify this convention. And maybe that would be my request personally to you, some of you eminent people here. We should all demand a judicial inquiry into the death based on the forensic experts' opinion about Azad and the journalist Hemchand Pandey. Because truth has to come out. If you do not bring out the truth, the peace process has gone derailed completely. The Maoists do not trust the government. I am morally feeling responsible for the death of Azad because I have been used. I have been used as a pawn by my own government. I have been a peace activist all my life. Why should I lose my own credibility? Although the Prime Minister has asked me again and again to continue with my peace effort, I am not going to get involved anymore. Because if this is the attitude of the government, which swears by the Constitution, which swears by human rights, which swears by many other great ideals and values, if they are stooping that low, it's high time that we from the civil society should raise our voice and call a spade a spade. So with this humble submission, I want to share with you, the documents are with me. If anybody wants, can get it photocopied. But this one single incident can be the trigger to start a new type of approach towards torture. Why is the police killing so many of our people in their own custody? Custodial torture and custodial death is the norm rather than an aberration in our country. Everybody knows it, nationally, internationally. But no hue and cry. So many innocent people are being tortured to death. And as rightly pointed out in the beginning, it is the official inaction which is responsible. That impunity should not be allowed. And therefore, I think that with all the expertise at our disposal, we should raise it in a manner that it becomes something which is of purpose and relevance in today's context. So, Vittal Rajanji, I seek your good offices, Dr. Dalbir Singh ji, and all of you friends and comrades, that let us speak up, raise our voice, not just as academics or experts from here and there and coming for a seminar or a conference like this, but let us make it politically relevant for today so that there can be peace in my country, in this country, and so that the exploitation of the indigenous people, 100 million indigenous people are being marginalized, they are being exploited, and they are being pushed to the wall, they are being forced to take up guns. I think a systematic approach towards torture and banning all types of inhuman torture can lead a great way to bringing about peace and justice to the poorest of the poor. Thank you very much.